Friends, I am so excited about this episode. This was not a topic I was planning, but when I came in contact with this person and started listening to what she had to say, I was so moved. I was so touched. I felt so seen. I just wanted to know everything about what she does. So today I have on Amber Mitchell, and she's known as the Astro Lotus. She's a professional astrologer, writer, podcaster, and intuitive guide. She began studying astrology over a decade ago and has been working professionally with many clients with different backgrounds since 2018. She started like many of us, right? Maybe checking our horoscope, analyzing our sun signs, seeing if friends or crushes were compatible. And then she got deeper. And she really uses astrology as a map for self-discovery and understanding human behavior. Compassion is something we talk about a lot. And she has a background in psychology. In couples counseling, you're going to feel that very much in our conversation. So it's really about growth, understanding, really better understanding ourselves and others to be kinder to ourselves and others. Her message is just amazing. I tried to use her a little bit to find out more about myself, my husband, but I plan on getting a more in-depth chart reading, and I hope that many of you will become followers of hers because I really believe that she is a healer and has a lot to offer. I know you're going to love this episode. We talk about the personal, we talk about the different planets, we talk about trauma healing, trauma in the charts, and we talk about, of course, what's going on in these times, and a little bit about what we can expect at a global level. It's a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much, Amber. So, Amber, welcome to Beyond Trauma.
Thank you. I'm glad to be
I'm
here.
really thrilled to have you. I have to go back and figure out how I found you, but I did find you on the Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
And when I did, I was like, oh my gosh, she knows me. Because
I
I'm
love
a
that.
Taurus. My sun and moon are both Taurus. And we're just going to turn this into a private session. No, I'm just kidding. But you were speaking to like this 7-year transformation that I was going through. And you were also speaking to like this stepping into this new phase. And it wasn't just for Taurus. There were a few other signs, but
Mm-hmm.
really about like self-knowing and coming into this new phase, I think especially in work as well, but it coming from not performing, but really like true inner knowledge and for like really good intent and right intentions. And I was like, she is describing everything I've been through and everything I'm walking into.
I love that. I love that. I
So
think I
tell me
know
how
which. I think I know which one you're talking
you
about.
know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
So folks, I'm going to put your Instagram in the show notes and people can go back and look at, how you've been laying it down. Like, I'm like, she speaks the truth. So I feel like so seen by you. And maybe
Oh,
that is, I mean, that's what I want to get into with this episode. People are probably like, why are we having astrology? So like, I found, like, I felt very seen by that. And I find that very healing. And so, maybe we can talk about that. Like, how can astrology, maybe you can tell us how you got into astrology, and then we can segue into like how it can be used towards like self-understanding and healing.
yeah, definitely, definitely. So, I mean, like most people, like I grew up like reading my horoscopes and magazines and things like that. And as I got older and through college, I was studying psychology with a focus on like human development. So, our psychology as we age, and also a focus on marriage and family therapy. So I've always just kind of wanted to understand people and like help them understand themselves. And so when I got into psychology or when I got into astrology, I saw how I think a lot of psychology feels like it puts you in a box. Like it just says, okay, you have this, and this, you check off these marks, so therefore this is what we're going to do with you. Whereas astrology, most people only understand their sun signs. They think everyone is just one of 12 signs.
Yeah.
And in the past few years, people have become more aware of, no, you actually have a planet for you have a sign for all of the planets, and everyone's chart is so different. You know, like no two charts are the same. Even with twins, they're born at different minutes of the day, so no two charts are the same. And I loved that aspect of looking at, you know, you have a very unique psychology, a very unique experience, and you know, so we can't just put you in one single box, and understanding it that way. So I have been practicing professionally since 2018, with hundreds of clients worldwide. And so, yeah, that's what I try to do with my social media platform, is really just give people the information in a way that doesn't feel overwhelming or doesn't feel, you know, like difficult to understand. Like everyone should be able to understand, hey, this is kind of what's going on.
Mm.
And I love that you said that it kind of, you know, seeing that post made you feel seen, because I think that when people first like start to understand their own astrology, I feel like that's the feeling that most people have, is like, oh wow, like I see myself in this. I feel understood looking at this. And so I love that you said that.
Yeah. It was a feeling of really being deeply understood, and it doesn't come from anyone who just, reads charts or does that little daily thing, or like you said, just focuses on, okay, the sun sign. Like, I can tell now, I didn't know that you have that background in psychology, but it makes so much sense because it feels like you're really bringing that in to the way that you're telling the story.
Yeah, definitely. I try to, and especially with, you know, understanding the psychology of how you change throughout your life and seeing that reflected in astrology. It's all about cycles. So saying like, oh yeah, like we can equate this to, okay, from age, you know, 1 to 12, you're going through puberty, but that's also like a Jupiter cycle. Like, you know, so we can look at those things and see how you're changing. And so I love to put it in that type of, using it as a language.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. As a language, as a way to understand cycles and periods of life. I love that you come from that life cycle background. And there's so many. I think, we just know, maybe some of us listening know about like Saturn returns, because I think
Hmm.
that's a popular one.
Yeah, that's a big one. That's it. I think if
uh,
that's the only thing you know, that's a good one to know. It's pretty important.
and that happens every like what, 28,
Yeah, about
29
from
years?
28 to 30 is when the Saturn return happens, and it's essentially Saturn rules over karma. It's consequences. So that's both positive and negative. And I like to phrase Saturn as you kind of have a, it's your karmic responsibility. And so, whatever you have kind of like set out to do, whatever you've agreed that this is my responsibility, I'm going to do this in this lifetime. The reason why it can be so difficult when we have our Saturn return is because if you have not been focusing on that, you know, it kind of feels like, oh, like you're coming back to check on me and I haven't like been doing the things, you know, people start feeling
Mm,
like, okay, I got to get on it and do the things that I'm supposed to be doing. And I think that is in general, most people, no one feels like at like 28, no one feels like, oh yeah, I'm got it all together. I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. So yeah, I can, it's a little bit, but I think at the end of that transit is where you really kind of see that purpose and you know how to move forward.
and that was 100% for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I left everything and like went to Rwanda and India and like taught
Oh wow.
yoga, in trauma sensitive way and for healing. And so it was like, I made everyone in my life mad, but I started following my,
Yay.
one of my true callings. So I'm curious, like, I like how you're talking about these cycles and patterns in the planets of like pushing us to our true mission. And I'm curious, like, as we look at our charts, um, what is the balance between like the being locked into this is how you are, which is like one way of looking at, or like this is who you could be, or you might be missing, you might not be tapping into something like the chart is saying, which is a direction you could go.
That's a great question. So, because I think a lot of people probably feel that way. Like, if it's not prescriptive, so I think that's important to understand. It doesn't dictate your life. It doesn't prescribe anything to you. I often like to explain to people that, because a lot of people don't know this, but astrology is not a religion. It can be used in your spiritual practice, but it's not a religion any more than the weather is religion, right? And
Mm.
so it can't control your life any more than weather controls your life. Now, depending on what you do in your lifestyle, that could be different. Like if you're a farmer, then weather's pretty important to what you're doing on a day to day basis. But for the most of us, we are using it as a tool to understand what's happening around us and, to be informed and how we interact with that. And so astrology is kind of like it's your personal weather, it's your personal map of, to understand yourself. And so everything kind of can play out on different levels of the different sides of the spectrum, and you get to choose in that, right? Like just because something shows in your chart does not mean that it's definitive. There is many different ways that things can play out in your chart, and so you have that free will to navigate that as you want.
Mm. I like
I hope
that.
that made sense. I hope I explained that in a way
Yeah,
that
no, I like
made
the
sense.
metaphor of the weather. Like you can decide, like, I'm gonna stay inside. You can decide, oh, I'm gonna go right out into it,
Exactly,
and
exactly. And I think
that
especially
storm.
with with storms, like, you to know that a storm is coming, to be able to prepare for it and know what tools you have to prepare for that storm, or you can just wing it. It's totally up to you.
That's right. That's right. So there's choice within that.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think it's very healing and helpful to understand, like, okay, I'm not just like crazy, like I'm feeling something that's happening, right?
Yes,
Like
yes.
the rain is falling.
Exactly. Yeah, and I
Yeah,
think it's nice
and
to have
yeah,
that confirmation too. Sometimes, like you said, some people feel like, okay, is it just me? Like, I feel crazy right now. What's going on? And then you see, like, oh, okay, there's eclipses, there's retrogrades. Okay, it's not just me. It's the energy is actually a bit off.
and I guess we're going through some of that now, right?
Yes, we are. Which
So this
also,
will be
if today, well, actually, I don't know when this is gonna be.
no, but we should tell people because this worked out kind of funny. Like we ended up recording on the spring equinox.
Yeah, yeah. And initially, I think the day we were going to record was the lunar eclipse, which maybe that's a good thing that we didn't that we didn't do that. But yeah, I was like, oh, that's kind of funny how that like worked out.
So there's a lot going on. Um, can you share with us, like, this will probably air in about a month. I don't know how far ahead you've looked. Is there
Mhm.
anything coming up maybe in like April, May, June, like we should look out for or be aware of?
Yeah, so this month, March is really like the thick of it. Is when the astrology is just pretty terrible. I feel like April and especially May is when things get much better. It calms down. I think if anyone is feeling like things have just been really chaotic and difficult, things really smooth out around that time. But we are going through a lot of changes this year, so I think that's kind of one of the important things to know that we have a lot of our outer planets, which are Neptune and Uranus and Pluto and Saturn as well. Those planets are all shifting signs, and essentially, those planets are more collective. They have a big impact on collective energy. And so there's just a lot of things kind of changing this year, if anyone's kind of feeling that. And I've been referring to this year's energy. It kind of feels like a bit of a preview. Like it's not quite a complete reset or anything like that. But it is kind of like here's a preview of what's to come, and you can kind of look at that, like look at the things that happen, I would say, over the next like 4 or 5 months. And how you handle that is okay, we will have some time to prepare for it at the end of the year, and then next year things really kind of kick off.
Oh my. Uh-oh. Well,
Yeah. I mean, I don't
yeah.
think, not in a bad way. I say this, I really, one of my main things when I first got like on Instagram doing astrology, I initially just got on Instagram. I wasn't like looking to get clients and build my business. I was just like, I like talking about this, and I just want to find people to talk to about it. But one thing I noticed was that there is a lot of like fear that goes around it. There's just a lot of fear mongering, and people even just hear about transits and things, and they're like, oh no, and I'm like, it's we really have to try to understand it, that it's all neutral, right? It's what you do with it, it's how
Mm.
you interpret it. So I really try to incorporate that in my readings and in what I'm the content that I put out. That it's everything is not something for you to freak out about. It's okay. If you understand it, then you'll be able to work through it a lot better.
That is such a good point. I mean, it goes back to like we have control over our reactions.
Mm-hmm.
So just because like things are shifting, and I think where the fear comes from, I mean, there's certain people that are playing into that, right?
Definitely.
When they're doing those posts on Instagram and whatnot. But then where the fear comes in from others who are receiving it is like change, right?
Mm-hmm.
We desire things to just stay the same. And, newsflash, I always say this,
Nothing,
guys,
yeah, everything, nothing stays the same.
constant
Yeah,
constant change. So I think that's where the holding is, like, oh no, I gotta be flexible again, but that's the
yeah,
life practice.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. There's, of course, it's a little uncomfortable, but if you can kind of expect it, if you know, I guess if you know your own personal tools for handling change, then that makes it a lot easier. I'm someone who I embrace change. Like I'm always kind of like, okay, what's the next like the next thing? So when I hear that, like, oh, things are changing, I'm like, okay, great, finally. Like things
Hmm.
have been too still for me. So, but I understand, of course, a lot of people, it's different for all of us.
Oh, I love that. You're like, "What's next?" So maybe we can
Yeah.
we can take some of that energy, like, just being curious. As
Yeah.
you said about, like, preparing, so this is our preview time.
Hmm.
Any thoughts coming up about, like, ways of preparing, or is it very individual?
Um, I would say so. It is very individual because it kind of depends on how these planets are impacting your personal chart. That kind of tells you what you should be focusing on and where the energy is going to be happening. I think one I will mention is that Neptune is moving into Aries, and that's a big one because Neptune moves pretty slow. And Neptune is our planet that kind of represents like the spirituality of the collective, and it's like our idealism and creativity. On a more negative side, it can be like illusions, and so I think that's something that many of us have been. Neptune has been in Pisces, and so there has been this wave of focus on like spirituality and healing. And I think that Neptune moving into Aries, aside from the collective things that it might imply, I think that energetically, Neptune moving into Aries is going to help us to kind of refocus on ourselves. I think we have been very like collective focused and focused on how we are all impacting one another, which is great, and we'll still have that energy in different ways. But I think to really focus on our own like spiritual journeys will be a really that will be a really positive aspect of that.
How you said Neptune moves slowly, so how long has it been in Pisces?
Um, Let me look because I don't know off the top of my head.
That's
I
okay,
think
I
it's
was
fine to
throwing that
say.
one out there. I was just like, I was relating to, like, that collective, because 'cause you're right, there has been a lot of, like, collective movements,
Hmm.
and I do feel myself turning back inward. So,
Yeah, yeah,
um
yeah. I know that it will be in Aries for about 14 or 15 years. So I
wow.
believe that that previous transit was probably about the same. It was probably about 14
Yeah.
or 15 years that it was in Pisces.
Wow. Yeah, that is super interesting,
Yeah.
and how we can just understand that and bring those 2 things together in ways.
Hmm. And I
They're
think it
both
will
so
help us to
important.
ground ourselves as well because Pisces energy is very like crown chakra type of energy. And so this is like bringing it back down to the root. And I think that will actually be, in some ways, I think that'll be a really good thing.
Yeah. My daughter's a Pisces, so
Oh, okay.
we got
And you're a
we
Taurus. That's those two signs they work really well together.
oh, good.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'd be in for a long no, yeah, no, it feels really good. My husband's an Aquarius, and I was like, "No, no, no, we can one in the family is enough."
Not just there's a one Aquarius limit.
I think so. I mean, we too many people, breaking with all, tradition and
I
all that
agree. I
is
think yeah that I don't want to call them chaotic, but yeah, Aquarius is definitely kind of will switch things up and change the norm. So I think just having one person doing that is good.
One is good, and like the Taurus is like, okay, let's keep it, I know we're talking very basic, but I'm really into that grounded. I definitely have enough of free spirit energy. So I think we're working well. Aquarius, Pisces, and Taurus in our little family, our little triangle.
That's so
But
nice and so balanced. You got the earth and water and air.
oh yeah, see?
Yeah.
I'll have to, yeah, offline I'll have to we'll talk about having you come and do some family charts. Do you do that?
I
Like,
actually haven't. I've done charts for like children, like when parents, have like
mm,
they just had their kids and they want to kind of, which I think is such a beautiful thing that they want to like understand their child's astrology to be able to, like nurture
yeah,
them better. But no, I haven't done like family readings, which I do offer compatibility and synastry charts, which most people would get those for romantic relationships. But I do indicate that, you can get them for any type of relationship, a friendship or family. But no, most
yeah.
people just do the romantic relationships.
I know people really interested, and some traditions like it's required, right? The astrology, right? Like in India, they do that for matchmaking purposes.
Okay, I did not know that. Wow.
Yes, and for selecting date of wedding, so they really lean into astrology. Um, yeah, so that's pretty interesting. I
Good. See, you're
definitely
teaching me
like
something. Astrology is so vast. I feel like you
so
never
vast.
know. You can't know everything about astrology. It's impossible. I'm always learning something new about astrology.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, I definitely put my daughters, I mean, this was a while ago, and I didn't use like a good qualified person, I'll admit it, but I put all her things in immediately, like online. I'm like,
Mhm.
as soon as she was born, to like figure out as much as I could about her. Like, what are we dealing with? Um,
Well, I mean, the
so
effort was there. I think that's,
the
that's,
effort was there. I'm
yeah.
like, I need to know. I need to know. So yeah, so to shifting back to like healing, I know there were some specific things in astrology that you wanted to talk about that are related to like trauma healing and forgiveness.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So, I guess where we can start is, like I mentioned, astrology is a really good way to kind of, I like to sometimes refer to it as like a cosmic mirror, to understand
Mm,
yourself. And there are definitely planets and placements that correlate more with trauma and healing. There's a minor planet, Chiron, that we refer to as the wounded healer. And I think that is probably one of the best placements to look at when we're talking about like healing from trauma, because it represents a wound. Oftentimes it's something we experience in like early childhood, and the ways that we can understand that wound to heal ourselves and heal others. And so, and it's an interesting thing to see kind of how Chiron can play out in terms of, I'm sure you've heard the phrase like, hurt people hurt people. We can kind of sometimes see that Chiron placement will show kind of how we express that externally, versus some people tend to internalize it, and then it causes us more, it causes you more damage internally. But I think that it's really key to, I don't think that it's helpful to just kind of say, to look at someone's chart and say, okay, you have this and this, correlates to trauma, or, to kind of go through the placements, which we can if you would like to. But I think more than anything, to know kind of what you do with that information, right? It's a very sensitive thing. So, like in my readings, I may see certain triggers and indicators because those things show up in the chart. But it's not something that I would just outright say to a client that, like, oh, you have this, so this correlates with this type of
mm,
trauma, because you never know how that played out in their life. And so I think it's more so when it's mentioned that, like, hey, this is something I've experienced, this is something I want to work through healing. And I can see in the chart that, okay, I can see where that energy is and kind of the best way to facilitate them understanding it and working through it.
when you see past trauma in someone's chart, can you see where that if that's like previously in this life, if that's coming from their parents, would you need their parents' charts, or could we be talking like other lifetimes?
We definitely could be talking other lifetimes. I will say that that is kind of an area of astrology I don't dive that deep into, but there definitely are people who like specialize in like past life astrology. But we see, like, for example, we have the 12 houses of the chart. So if you ever, for your listeners, of course, if they pull up their birth chart, there's plenty of like free like websites where you can just put your information in and get your chart. And so the 12 houses, the 12th house is associated with both the subconscious and the past life. So sometimes, that we can see that. More often than not, Chiron is something that you experience in early childhood. It may have to do with the parents. Like if I see that it's connected to the moon, that's usually mother wounds, or cancer as well would be, mother things. And then the sun or Jupiter could be things with their father. So yeah, you can see you don't necessarily have to see their parents' chart. You can kind of you can see it in the individual chart.
I love that. Oh, I'm so curious now where mine is.
Yeah, we could definitely look at it after. And
No,
I
this
think
is
it's
very
so
helpful.
interesting to see, because again, like, you kind of know what the things are that you know what you've experienced, but when you see it, like, I know the first time that I like looked up my Chiron placement and seeing, I was like, oh, I never thought of it that way. Like I never, you know, was able to kind of contextualize it in that way and then understanding it better.
Yeah, and I think if that's, like, the main thing we get across today, it's so valuable. Like, these are frameworks for thinking about your life, your experiences, your inner world. Just as, like, you can look at, like, development, right? Lifespan development. Where was I at that time? Like, how did that coincide with, maybe like Erickson's like stage of development? Like, what should I have been doing that got disrupted? You can use
Exactly.
lots of different frameworks to understand, and they're all the purpose is deeper self understanding. And I think hopefully from that, and we can talk a little bit about this. So I know you wanted to like deeper compassion for others.
Definitely, definitely. And so I will just say, kind of backtracking on what you said, and understanding the cycles that you're going through with your healing journey. That's one thing a lot of people look to astrology for. Is like I get a lot of comments that are like, okay, when is this going to be over? Like, I've been going through it for this amount of time. Like, when do I get a break? And so I think being able to see those cycles and see kind of where are you at in that healing process is really helpful.
Oh my gosh, some of them are really long.
Yeah, they are, but I think it helps to know that, everything has its cycle. Nothing is gonna last forever. So,
That's right.
yeah. And then, yeah, definitely on the compassion side of it, like I mentioned, my first career track was marriage and family therapy, and so really I love the idea of the way that astrology helps us understand one another. So on a very like simple level, we were just kind of talking about this with you and your daughter and your husband. The compatibility of those signs, but when you dive deeper into it and understand, like, Mercury is how you communicate. Venus is, your values and what brings you pleasure. The moon is your emotions, and kind of understanding, okay, that's how this person sees things, and this is how, you can see how that energy works. And like my husband and I have very interesting compatibility, and I can see, like, okay, it's one thing to be like, okay, like, you just don't get what I'm saying, like, you're not understanding what I'm saying. But then to see, okay, I have Mercury in Pisces, he has Mercury in Aries, I'm focused on how it feels, he's more direct with the
Mm.
facts and what it is, and saying, okay, I can meet you halfway. Like, I can understand why you think that way.
Oh, I love
Um,
that.
yeah. So
Give us
being
more
able to,
examples. Yeah, I love that.
you said what?
Give us more examples like that. That is so cool.
Oh,
As
definitely.
you think of
So
them.
I think, moon sign compatibility is huge, because that's what we need to feel safe and secure. So a lot of times people tend to date their like moon signs or their Venus signs. Venus sign is kind of, it's like a feel good placement, so that's what you're like aesthetically attracted to.
Mm.
And yeah, kind of understanding that, we have like Mars, which rules like our action and our drive and sex drive as well. And so kind of seeing Mars compatibility, that's one that can sometimes play out kind of volatile. Like if you have difficult Mars aspects with someone, it's like, okay, there might be some issues there with Mars, because it rules kind of like our anger and things like that. So yeah, and I think especially people looking like reflecting on like past relationships and seeing, okay, this person had this and this is why, there was so much tension there, and being able to understand kind of how you can work through it. I don't think that I truly don't think that there's such thing as like bad compatibility. Like I would never look at two people's charts and say, oh, you just shouldn't be together. I
Mm.
think you can see like, okay, these are some of the challenges. These are some of the strengths. Some relationships have more challenges and some relationships have more strengths. And it's up to
Yeah.
you to kind of decide, how do we work through that?
Is it like, is it, I don't want to say bad or good, but like, do people tend to go to their opposites, or like is it good to have like a little bit of the same and a little bit of different, or like do people go to exactly like themselves? Like what do you see happen most?
So definitely opposites. It is true that opposites attract. So that is absolutely true in astrology. The amount of people I know that like Pisces, Virgo relationships, Taurus, Scorpio relationships. So a good example, like both of my parents are Taurus sons, so I'm like there was that kind of sameness there. But my stepdad is a Scorpio, so I'm like, the Taurus Scorpio thing. They definitely opposites attract, and I love to see that in relationship charts because I think that it gives you a good it allows you to meet somewhere in the middle. While it is considered a difficult aspect to have the opposites, it kind of allows you to essentially, you both represent the same energy, just at different sides of that spectrum. So it
Mm.
allows you to kind of see yourself reflected in the other person and to have that compassion and meet in the middle somewhere.
Feels like growth. Like that's what's coming to me. Like it it can teach you so much to grow in yourself and how you see others,
Yeah.
as opposed to like too much sameness. I was with a Taurus once and it was kind of like boring. It's like
That's so
too
funny.
much the same.
That is funny, especially because Taurus is a sign that it's our most consistent energy. I used to work with a guy who is so funny because he was a Taurus sun and he would eat the same thing for lunch every single day.
That sounds
And I was
right.
like, that is hilarious. That is very Taurus of you.
That sounds right to me. What
But
about,
yeah, there's
okay, so my,
definitely,
yeah, go on.
oh, I was just going to say, but yeah, there's definitely a mix. I think it's a good thing to have those opposites, and in some ways, it's a good to, same signs or like same element, like the fire signs definitely tend to get along with each other, the water signs get
Mm,
along with each other. And then we have the ones that are like conflicting. And the way that I really like to look at that, so for example, like you mentioned that you're a Taurus and your husband's an Aquarius, and those two signs are actually conflicting. They form in astrology what's called a square because they're three signs away from each other. And so, but the way that I like to look at that, even though it's considered a aspect that causes tension, it requires some action. And anytime I see squares, I see that one planet can sometimes trigger the other one.
mm,
But essentially, the reason why this happens is they're always in the same modality. And so what that means is like Taurus is a fixed sign and Aquarius is also a fixed sign. So we have our
yeah.
cardinal signs, which get things started. That's Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. We have our fixed signs, which are in the middle of the season, and they kind of keep the energy flowing. They keep it, going. And that's Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. And then we also have our mutable signs, which are the ones that transition us from one season to the next. And that's Pisces, Virgo, Gemini, and Sagittarius.
Huh.
So I'm sorry, I kind of gave a little like mini
I love
astrology
that.
101 right there. But I said that because when I see those planets that conflict, we have to keep in mind that they have the same modality. So essentially, you want the same thing, just in different ways. And I think when you can understand that, like, oh, that's why we're triggering each other. That's why there's conflict because I want the stability. I want to keep it the same. You want the stability. You want to keep it the same, but we want to do that in different ways. So,
Mm. Again, leading to greater understanding.
yep, exactly.
My husband and I have something interesting. We both have, so I have sun and moon in Taurus,
Hmm.
and he also has sun and moon in Aquarius.
Oh, wow.
And I
That is
heard
so
that when
cool.
when your sun and your moon are the same, tell me if this is true, that like basically like you don't have like you don't fake, like your kind of inner and outer world are like kind of like the same. I
Aligned.
know I have no poker face. Like
Yeah, so
um
I actually haven't heard it phrased that way, but yes, there is. So there is a really good alignment of like your heart and mind. You could say that. It's a good alignment of the subconscious and the conscious. We look at the sun as the conscious and the moon as the subconscious. So that's perfect. It also means you guys were both born on new moons, which is very cool. So there's that. Even though you're fixed signs, you kind of have that like energy of always wanting to start something new.
very
Um,
true.
and so, but yeah, I'd never heard it phrased that way. I think kind of what I think of with what you described is the Mercury and the Sun. That's the one that I always look at because Mercury doesn't move too far from the sun. It can't be more than one sign away. And so I always look at like, I refer to that as kind of your filter. Like if your Mercury is really close to your sun, you have no filter. You're saying what comes to your mind as soon as it comes to your mind. Whereas if your Mercury is in a different sign, you know, a little further away, you have more of that filter where you think about things and process things. And then you, or you might, you know, kind of hold yourself back from expressing yourself more.
Mm. And tell us about rising. I'm a Cancer rising, and my husband is a
Okay.
Taurus rising.
Is a Taurus. Okay, so I love that. So you have like your sun and moon falling in his first house. So the rising sign, some people will frame it as like a mask, but ultimately the rising sign is your overall outlook on life. And if you think about your chart as kind of like the book of your life, the rising sign is like the cover of that book. So
Mm.
it's how you're kind of going through life, how you approach life in general. With him being a Taurus rising, I'm a Taurus rising as well. So, you know, we tend to want things to be easy. We tend to like for things to kind of flow as easy as possible versus an energy like, for example, like Capricorn rising. They tend to like to have something to accomplish. They tend to kind of bring that energy of this might be difficult, but we're gonna get through it. Versus the Taurus rising is like, no, I don't want it to be difficult. We're just gonna we're just gonna
Yeah,
chill.
that sounds right.
Yeah, so it's kind of
Yeah.
your overall outlook. And I also describe it in my readings that it's kind of adds a flavor to all of your other planets. It's the way that all of your other planets are going to express themselves.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I heard it as like kind of how you move through life. It's a
Hmm.
very important, like the rising is one of the really important ones to know,
Definitely.
right?
And I think it's what people, it's the energy you're always carrying with yourself. And so it's the one that people get from you, like when they first meet you. If they, like, if someone, because people love to do this, you know, when I tell them, like, oh, I'm an astrologer, they're like, oh, what's my sign? Can you guess it? And I'm like, I know that what I'm going to guess is probably your rising sign because I'm just picking up on the energy that I'm, you know, getting from you. And that's usually the rising sign energy.
Hmm. I love that. I love that. Um, are there certain planets to look for in our chart for like resilience, for strength, for getting through hard things?
Definitely. So I actually think all of them could be used in that way, one way or another. But I will say that Mars, we just talked about that a little bit. Mars is a planet that represents how you handle day to day challenges. So little obstacles and things that come up in your day to day is how you handle that. So knowing your Mars can really help you to kind of direct your energy and use it in that way. The moon, of course, your emotional stability. If you know can understand what it is that you need, like on a basic level, your emotional
Mm,
needs will definitely help. And I would say Saturn as well, and that's the one a lot of people hear and get afraid of. But Saturn definitely, it's kind of like the higher octave or the more evolved version of Mars. And so it really helps you to get through the difficult, like more difficult things that happen in life, not just like on a day to day basis. And it really represents your ability to like persevere through those challenges.
and are there certain, I know we talked about, so we talked about the Saturn cycle is like that 28 to 30 years. And the first one you talked about, was it Jupiter?
Yeah, Jupiter. Yeah, so Jupiter
And
has
that
12-year
was
cycles.
12-year cycle. Are there other kind of time frames to look at?
Yeah, so I mean, every planet
All
has
of them.
its, yeah, they all have their cycles. So, um, yeah, so Jupiter is a big one because that one really kind of shows how we grow and like mature. You can kind of see through those like cycles of like 12 years old, 24 years old, 32 years old, right? And the
Mm,
differences there. And Jupiter is the planet that represents like our higher mind, our wisdom, as well as, our growth and expansion. So, kind of, seeing those cycles is really helpful. Let's see, Saturn, we talked about the kind of 28-year cycles. Yeah, I'm honestly, I know Venus has like an 8-year cycle, so kind of about every 8 years you should have like well, you actually have your Venus return once a year, but yeah, I think those are kind of like the
those are big ones.
most important cycles. We have, the moon cycle, of course, is 28 days, so that, once a
I
month
was
we're
just going to go into
lunar.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
so a lot of people are familiar with that, and I think that's great because it's a really visible one that we
Hmm.
can see. That's, it's so powerful for us, looking at the moon.
Yeah,
I know for
definitely.
me, I get up very early, I see the moon, I look like what phase it's in. It has like a strong it's so present. It's so present.
Definitely.
So I'm curious maybe if you have any advice for us around like the moon cycle questions that we should ask ourselves at different points of that cycle, or different energies that happen as we go from like the full to the new and back again. Like, should we watch that flow of our month?
Definitely. So, and that is kind of like a whole thing. Like, I feel like we could have a whole episode on like
Sorry.
lunar cycles itself. Definitely. So, but if you're tuned into those cycles, I think, at least, recognizing the new and the full moon cycle, like, if you can kind of, because it can be difficult to keep up with like every single day what the moon is doing. But, yeah, the new moon cycle is when we are more ready to start new things, set our intentions, and then 2 weeks later, we have our full moon, which is where we either kind of release or it kind of reaches its peak. And then on a greater scale, I like to talk about this a lot in my content, that it's on a 6 month cycle. So, really, when you have like a new moon in a certain sign, for example, well, I don't want to use this upcoming one because it's a solar eclipse, but if you have a new moon in Aries, you're starting something new in that area of your life, and it doesn't, fully play out in 2 weeks in that month. In actuality, it fully plays out in like a 6 month cycle. So about six
Mm,
months later is when you may see something, full moons illuminate for us. So, you may kind of have a realization about that thing, or you may receive, if it's something you're trying to manifest, that may be around the time that you receive it. Or it may be a time when you recognize, okay, I have to release this and let it go.
mm,
So, and
love that.
especially like for women, I think it's really important for us to pay attention to the lunar cycles. And it's something I've actually gotten more into over the past couple years, is paying attention to like my natural cycle, because I was on birth control for a really long time. And then getting off of it, I was like, okay, I need to like recognize when, my personal cycle, and then what's also happening in the lunar cycle. And so I try to stick more with my personal cycle, and recognizing that, like, the first day of your cycle is like your new moon period. And so, and then you're a couple weeks after that, when you're ovulating, that's like your full moon period. And so
Yes.
recognizing kind of how to use that energy.
Yeah. I've heard some people like try to line it up.
I'll be honest, I don't think you can, but it will, you'll recognize that it will line up itself. So it's really
Mm,
interesting. Like, whenever I'm like really focused on doing something new, I'm really focused on like, okay, I'm going to be in a new like phase of my life. I'm starting a lot of new things. I'll realize that my cycle will sync up with the new moon. Versus when I'm more in like a resting phase, and I'm like, okay, I just kind of want to declutter and just rest, then I'll notice that it syncs up more with the full moon. And sometimes, it can be in between. It might, sync up with like the first quarter moon or the last quarter moon. So,
it's just something, like you said, to start paying attention to. I know I have to, personally, that's something that I want to put some more energy into.
yeah. Yeah, I try to take advantage of, recognizing when I'm in my new moon phase. That's kind of how I think about it now, like in terms of like my cycle. I'm like, okay, I'm in my new moon phase. I need to rest. I need to just, set my intentions and just kind of chill. And then as the energy builds up, I'm like, okay, I've got all this energy. I'm gonna go ahead and like get a lot of things done now that I can, I have all this energy to work with.
Exactly. You can really, like, if you work with it, you can really kind of like the word that's coming to mind is not exactly right, but like capitalize on it, on those energies.
Yeah,
Lean into them.
definitely. Yeah, lean into it.
Lean into them. Use them, for all you can.
Yeah. Or
Um,
even just, giving yourself grace, because I think like
Grace.
I
Yeah.
try to be so productive all the time, and then recognizing like when, after like, when I'm in my waning moon phase, right after
Yes.
ovulation, I'm like, okay, my energy levels are dropping. I need to give myself grace and recognize like I just got to do what I can today, right? And I
I have
have
gotten
to
better with that.
exactly.
Exactly. Especially with age. And I have noticed that because I do like yoga, but I also do like weights and kettlebells. And I'm like, why can't I lift that? Like this thing that like a week ago I was like throwing around. I'm like, my body is saying no.
No, yep.
And then I'll look and I'll be like, oh yeah, you're you're going into that phase. So and
Yeah,
it
you
that's
got to take
also
a deep
again
breath.
helpful
Yeah.
for being like, this makes sense.
Yeah,
There's a
exactly.
reason. It's not that
Exactly.
I'm
Instead
being
of thinking like, oh,
lazy.
I'm just, yeah, like I'm just being lazy, or like, oh, like, why can't I do this? Like, no, you actually have less energy to work with. It's okay. Do something, go a little lighter, and,
Exactly.
yeah, tune into your body and kind of, recognize what it needs at that time. Or like, a lot of us, um, in the like weeks before our cycle, like we crave carbs, but recognizing like, well, that's because that's like grounding foods, and we actually need that during that cycle. So don't beat yourself up for wanting carbs before that. So
Exactly. Oh, I love this. This has all been about really like listening and compassion and like understanding. Is there anything that I didn't ask you about today, Amber, that's important to bring into the conversation?
I think we did kind of touch a little bit on compassion for a second, and I did kind of want to just go back to that. Just in terms of, because we kind of talked about like relationship astrology and understanding one another, but I also think, especially right now, it's just a huge theme we have, which I know this will come out like a month later, but we have Venus retrograde and we have Mercury retrograde in Aries, and I think a big theme has been forgiveness. And
Mm,
so I think, like, in terms of healing and forgiving, it's one of the best things that we can use to look at. If you can have the privilege of, being able to look at someone else's astrology and really understanding kind of like what their trauma is, understanding like what the difficult things are that they go through, and being able to kind of, of course we don't blame, we don't make excuses like, oh, your astrology is like, this is why you're like this because of your astrology, but recognizing, oh, okay, that's what you were going through, and that's kind of how that reflected in our relationship, and having compassion in that way, I think is really important.
I love that. And I really liked your kind of recommendation to maybe like do your chart with your friend, or a different
Yeah.
relationship, not just your romantic partner.
Yeah, and definitely, I would say probably like business partnerships. That's another one that
Oh,
people going into business will oftentimes want to get charts made around that, and so they'll say, okay, is this a good person for me to go into business with? And I think that's a really good thing to do,
oh my gosh, that's awesome. I
because
bet a
that
lot of
is
people are
somewhere
like,
where
I
I
wish I
might
did that.
say, like, I wouldn't say like, oh, you and this person shouldn't be together, but that is somewhere where I might say like, well, this has to do with finance, this has to do with communication, and if there's like really big challenges there, it's like, is that something that you're going to work through those challenges in that specific area?
Yeah, no, that's a great idea and could be very eye-opening.
Yeah, definitely.
Before we wrap, is there anything else that you want to say about like the times that we're in? I know we said a little bit about like preparing, and we said a little bit about that we're going to go a little bit more internal. Um, there's a lot of uncertainty right now, and um,
Definitely.
can you speak to anything of like the global thing and anything to kind of watch out for or do or just consider? during like in that sense.
Yeah, so I don't like to do specific predictions on kind of what's going on. I think there are definitely astrologers who like specialize in predictive work and are really great at that. But I think one thing to keep in mind is to not take some of that, like if any of your audience is tapped in with astrology, to not take any of that as something to fear, right? Though some people may be saying certain things are going to happen based on certain transits, because we can see in the past what has happened with certain transits, and that's we use that informs our predictions. But I think first and foremost, no one knows. No one knows
Yeah.
exactly what that's going to look like. Um, and I think kind of like we talked about earlier, that recognizing everything has its cycle. So, it's all temporary. Nothing is going to last forever. It is very uncertain times, and it is, there's a lot of chaos going on in the world, and it's very difficult. I think also that knowing that it's not something that is just you, right? You're not just going through a chaotic, like, we are all experiencing this collectively. And so we'll all get through it. I feel like that sounds a little bit cliche to say, but, the energy of this year is, I do a bit of numerology as well. So the energy this year is a 9, which represents completion and kind of wrapping things up. So try to utilize that in your personal life. That, what are the things that you can kind of, bring certain cycles to a close and wrap things up. And also recognize that that's what's happening collectively. So there are a lot of things that need to kind of reach the full scope of their cycle, and then next year, when things kind of start over. And I don't like using the word reset. I feel like that sounds kind of harsh. People think of like a
Mhm.
reset, but
Right.
it will be a new beginning. We can kind of use that
Mm.
language. Um, so yeah, I think that's the main thing, and that yeah, you're not crazy. The the astrology is pretty chaotic, so.
Well, I love that. I really appreciate that you don't come from fear baiting. And I
Definitely.
really like what you brought to our consciousness about like we're in this together, nothing lasts forever, tying things up. I know this is a year of completion for me with getting my master's in mental health
Oh,
counseling.
congratulations.
So that resonated a lot with me, as does everything you share, Amber. It really does. You really resonate with me. I was called to speak with you and to follow you. And I appreciate you very, very much.
Thank you. And I appreciate you for having me. And this is actually the first, I was very nervous because this is actually the first like podcast that I've done other than my own. And so
So tell people about
I'm very
yours.
excited. Oh yeah, sure. So I do have a podcast. It's available on all podcast platforms called Where Did We Start? And we explore the stars as well as ourselves. So I don't do my Instagram is very like astrology focused, and my podcast I like to talk about all things kind of spirituality and self improvement with a little kind of dash of astrology added in there.
And you also have some subscription programs as well, right?
No, I do offer services. Oh, yes,
Yeah.
actually, why did I say no? Yes, I do have a Patreon. I do have a
Patreon.
Patreon where, yeah, I have a great community over on Patreon where we kind of dive we dive deeper into the astrology as well as like the self improvement. And I really kind of marry the two there, to kind of see like what your astrology, kind of how you can use that for self improvement, and getting a lot more specific. Whereas I think, on my Instagram, it's, very general information that, applies to everyone. Yeah, and then I also do offer services. I do offer one-on-one readings at my website, the Astro Lotus. My Patreon is also the Astro Lotus, the Cosmic Cousins, and I'm the Astro Lotus everywhere. So
Yeah. Great. And we'll link all that in the show notes. And I know, like, folks, if this resonated with you, and go and look at Amber's Instagram, because you'll see she gives you like a little bit, and then you'll be wanting to go into that Patreon and go a little bit deeper. I love the combination of the astrology with the self improvement and the healing. I guess that's why I felt really called to you, Amber. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
thank you for having me. I love this. This is a great conversation.